She limped past them, blood-stained bandage, crutches digging into dust, eyes forward like steel. They laughed, loud, mocking. Seals don't need crutches, one sneered. Must have tripped over her own boots. But laughter dies fast when truth walks on wounded legs. And what came next shattered their pride, their jokes, and their very understanding of courage. This is the story of a woman they underestimated, until she made them wish they'd never opened their mouths. The sun hammered down on Camp Bastion like a vengeful god, turning sand into molten glass and metal into branding irons. Dust devils spun lazily between Humvees and sandbagged bunkers, while the air shimmered with heat haze that blurred the edges of reality. In this scorched theater of war, where every breath tasted of grit and gunpowder, Lieutenant Carter moved with quiet dignity through the compound's central courtyard, a lone figure navigating a landscape designed for men who believed strength was measured in muscle mass and machismo. Her uniform, though crisp at the collar, bore the scars of recent combat. A torn sleeve stitched hastily with field thread, dirt ground deep into the knees of her camo pants, and most telling, the thick, blood-tinged gauze wrapped around her left thigh, held tight by medical tape, now peeling at the edges from sweat and movement. She leaned heavily on aluminum crutches, each step a silent testament to pain endured and will unbroken. Behind her, the shadow of a medevac chopper still hung faintly in the sky, its rotor wash having just settled moments ago. She had been evacuated from Forward Operating Base Kandahar after an IED blast tore through her patrol vehicle during a routine supply run, an explosion that killed 2 soldiers instantly and left her with shrapnel wounds, a fractured femur, and a concussion that should have grounded her for months. But here she was, back within hours, refusing sedation, refusing rest, demanding to return to duty because the mission doesn't stop for broken bones. Her presence alone was an affront to the casual arrogance that permeated the SEAL team lounging against the wall nearby. They were the elite, the untouchables, the ones who trained harder, pushed further, and scoffed at anyone who couldn't keep up. And so, when Carter passed them, head high, jaw set, they didn't offer sympathy, they offered ridicule. "Look at the walking casualty," muttered Petty Officer Ramirez, smirking as he adjusted his sunglasses. "Guess the Army forgot to teach her how to duck." His buddy, Chief Warrant Officer Briggs, let out a low chuckle. Or maybe she thought being cute would save her from getting blown up. The others joined in, snickers rippling through the group like wildfire. One even mimicked her limp, exaggerating the sway of her hips and the clatter of her crutches, drawing more laughter. A few pointed fingers, a fake cough followed by a whispered, "Medal of shame." Carter didn't flinch, didn't turn, didn't slow. Her gaze remained fixed ahead, locked onto the command tent where General Hayes awaited her briefing. Inside her mind, however, the words echoed, not as insults, but as fuel. She remembered the faces of those she lost, the screams of the wounded, the way her hands trembled as she applied pressure to a soldier's severed artery while bullets whined overhead. She remembered screaming orders through cracked lips, dragging bodies to cover, refusing to leave anyone behind, even when her own legs screamed in protest. These SEALs, they hadn't seen what she'd seen, hadn't bled what she'd bled, hadn't carried the weight of command when chaos reigned. Their laughter wasn't just disrespectful, it was ignorant. And ignorance, she knew, could be corrected. But not today. Today, she had reports to file, intelligence to relay, and a mission to complete. Tomorrow? Tomorrow might be different. As she disappeared into the tent flap, the SEALs continued their mockery, unaware that the woman they mocked was about to become the reason their entire operation nearly collapsed, and the only person who could pull it back from the brink. Little did they know, the real test wasn't physical endurance or tactical brilliance. It was humility. And humility, unlike muscle or rank, couldn't be trained. It had to be earned, often through shame. Hours later, under the bruised twilight sky streaked with orange and violet, the mood at Camp Bastion shifted violently, from lazy arrogance to panicked urgency. A coded emergency transmission crackled over the radio nets. Enemy insurgents had breached Perimeter Alpha, bypassing motion sensors and thermal imaging thanks to a compromised encryption key, one that had been stolen during a raid 3 days prior, a raid that had gone sideways due to faulty intel. Now, The enemy was closing in on the communications hub, threatening to sever all satellite links, disable drone surveillance, and cut off reinforcements for the entire southern sector. The SEAL team, previously lounging in idle confidence, was suddenly scrambling, strapping on gear, checking weapons, shouting orders that sounded hollow against the rising tide of fear. Commander Hayes burst out of the operations tent, face pale, voice strained. "We've got 30 minutes before they hit the comms array. If we lose that, we're blind, deaf, and dead." He turned to the SEAL leader, Lieutenant Commander Vance, who stood frozen mid-zipper, his usual swagger replaced by wide-eyed dread. "You've got the best recon team in theater. Get in there, neutralize the threat, extract any surviving personnel, and secure the data core. Move." Vance nodded sharply, barking commands into his headset, assembling his squad with military precision. But as they loaded into armored vehicles, a voice cut through the noise. Not loud, not angry, but cold as desert night. "You're going in blind." All heads turned. There stood Carter, leaning again on her crutches, her leg visibly swollen beneath the bandage, but her posture rigid, eyes blazing with clarity. She held a tablet in one hand, scrolling rapidly. "The insurgents aren't using standard tactics. They're mimicking our patrol patterns, exploiting gaps in your rotation schedule. They know exactly where you'll be because someone leaked your deployment logs." Vance scoffed. "And how would you know that?" Carter didn't blink. "Because I decrypted the intercepted chatter while you were laughing at my limp." The encryption key they stole? It was embedded in a file tagged Operation Silent Dagger, a classified Joint Ops document I accessed via the backup server you guys forgot existed. You thought I was just some wounded officer coming back to collect medals. I came back to finish the job you started, and failed." Silence fell like a guillotine. Even the wind seemed to pause. Briggs looked away. Ramirez swallowed hard. Vance's jaw tightened. "Prove it," he growled. Carter tapped the screen. "Here's the route they're taking. Here's the timing window. And here's the trap they've laid for you. If you follow your original plan, you walk straight into an ambush with RPGs and machine guns waiting at the choke point near the old water tower. Your elite insertion strategy? It's already been anticipated, because you assumed no one else could think like you." "Wrong." She handed him the tablet. "I can guide you. From here. Or you can go in blind, and die trying to prove you're better than me." The SEALs exchanged glances. Pride warred with survival. Finally, Vance exhaled sharply. "Fine. You lead. But if this goes south," Carter cut him off. "It won't. Because unlike you, I don't fight to impress. I fight to survive. And win." As the SEALs piled back into their vehicles, now following Carter's coordinates instead of their own, the laughter that once filled the courtyard evaporated like morning mist. In its place lingered something heavier: regret. Regret for mocking her pain. Regret for underestimating her mind. Regret for believing that toughness was only found in unblemished bodies and unshaken egos. What they didn't realize yet was that this wasn't just about saving the comms hub. It was about redemption. And the woman they ridiculed was about to become the architect of their salvation, and the mirror reflecting their deepest flaws. When the first shots rang out in the distance, echoing across the dunes, none of them dared look back at Carter. They didn't need to. Her presence was already etched into their souls. Not as a cripple, not as a joke, but as the commander they never expected and the hero they desperately needed. The battle hadn't even begun, but the real war, the one inside them, was already lost. And she hadn't even fired a shot. The night swallowed the desert whole, wrapping the battlefield in a velvet shroud pierced only by muzzle flashes and the occasional red glow of night vision goggles. Inside the Tactical Operations Center, a repurposed shipping container now humming with encrypted comms and stressed personnel, Carter sat perched on a field stool, crutches propped against her chair like silent sentinels. Her leg throbbed with every heartbeat, a dull, insistent drum reminding her that pain was not an obstacle but a companion. Sweat beaded on her forehead, not from heat, but from concentration as her fingers danced across the tablet, adjusting overlays, recalibrating drone feeds, and relaying real-time enemy movements to the SEAL team's earpieces. Bravo 2, hold position. 3 hostiles advancing from the east trench. Thermal shows they're carrying Dragunovs. Wait for my mark. Her voice was calm, steady, authoritative, the kind of tone that didn't ask for obedience but earned it through sheer competence. Outside, chaos reigned. Gunfire cracked like thunder. Flares bloomed in the distance, casting spectral shadows over the dunes. But inside that metal box, there was only clarity and quiet fury. Not at the insurgents, not at the mission, but at the arrogance that had nearly cost them everything. Minutes earlier, Vance had radioed in, breathless, voice strained. "They were exactly where you said. You saved our skins." Carter hadn't replied. She didn't need thanks. She needed results. And now, as the SEALs fought to regain control of the comms hub, she uncovered a deeper layer of betrayal, one that chilled her more than any desert wind. A mole. Not just any informant, but someone inside Camp Bastion itself. The encryption key hadn't been stolen in the field. It had been handed over willingly. Buried in the data logs was a pattern, consistent access from a terminal logged under Tech Specialist Ramirez. Her eyes narrowed. Ramirez. The same one who'd mocked her limp, who'd mimicked her stride, who'd called her a ghost before she'd even spoken a word. The irony was brutal. While he laughed at her wounds, he was selling secrets that would have gotten them all killed. She hesitated only a second before patching Hayes directly. "Sir, we've got a leak. And it's one of ours." Hayes went silent for a heartbeat. Then, "Confirm it." She did, cross-referencing login timestamps with patrol rosters, tracking anomalous data transfers, isolating a single IP that pinged to a compromised satellite relay. Every thread led back to Ramirez. As the realization settled in, so did a cold resolve. She couldn't afford emotion now, not when lives still hung in the balance. "Redirect Bravo team," she ordered. "Secure the eastern server rack. That's where the mole's last upload originated. And detain Ramirez on site. Non-lethally." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Then Vance's voice, low and thick with shame. "Understood. No excuses. No defensiveness. Just obedience." Because in that moment, they finally saw her, not as a wounded soldier, not as a woman out of place, but as the only mind sharp enough to see through the fog of war and the rot within their own ranks. When the SEALs breached the server room, they found Ramirez trying to wipe the terminal, panic twisting his face into something unrecognizable. He didn't resist arrest, just stared at the ground, whispering, "I didn't think it would go this far." Back in the ops center, Carter watched the feed. No triumph lit her eyes. Only sorrow. War didn't just kill bodies, it corrupted souls. And sometimes, the enemy wore your uniform. As dawn began to bleed across the horizon, painting the sky in hues of rose and ash, the comms hub was secure. The data core was intact. The mole was in custody. And the SEAL team? They stood in a loose semicircle outside the ops container, helmets off, weapons slung low. Waiting. Not for orders. For forgiveness. But Carter didn't offer it. Not yet. Forgiveness had to be earned, just like respect. And they had a long road ahead. Still, as she rose, wincing but unaided, and limped toward the door, they parted like the Red Sea, eyes downcast, voices silent. The woman they mocked now walked among them like a ghost made flesh, her silence louder than any reprimand. And in that silence, they heard the truth they'd been too proud to see. Courage isn't the absence of wounds. It's the will to move forward despite them. In the days that followed, Camp Bastion changed, not in structure, but in spirit. The swagger that once clung to the SEAL compound like cologne had evaporated, replaced by a quiet discipline that spoke of humility learned through near catastrophe. Training drills became more collaborative. Briefings included input from medics, intel officers, and even logistics personnel, voices once dismissed as background noise now treated as critical threads in the mission tapestry. And at the center of it all stood Carter, still on crutches, still bearing the scars of her sacrifice, yet never once demanding recognition. She didn't need it. Her presence alone was a lesson. Vance, once the poster boy of ego-driven excellence, began arriving early to help her navigate the uneven terrain between tents, not out of pity, but out of a dawning respect that bordered on reverence. Briggs, who had once chuckled at her pain, now double-checked every intel source before acting, haunted by how close his laughter had come to costing lives. Even the younger SEALs, fresh-faced and full of fire, spoke of her in hushed tones, not as that wounded officer, but as the one who saw what we couldn't. The military tribunal for Ramirez ended swiftly, dishonorable discharge, life imprisonment, and a legacy reduced to a cautionary footnote. But Carter refused to dwell on betrayal. Instead, she pushed forward, clearing her name from the unofficial list of noncombatants that some higher-ups had quietly placed her on after her injury. She submitted a fitness for duty report so thorough it left no room for doubt. She ran simulations with one leg elevated. She recalibrated targeting systems using voice commands when her hands shook from painkillers. She led a cyber counterintelligence workshop that exposed 3 more latent vulnerabilities in coalition comms protocols. And when General Hayes pinned a bronze star with valor on her chest during the weekly formation, the entire base, SEALs included, stood at full attention, silent, eyes forward, pride swallowed whole. But the real victory wasn't in medals or promotions. It was in the shift. The moment a new female recruit from the Army Corps of Engineers limped into base with a sprained ankle and was met not with jeers, but with, "Need a hand." It was in the after-action report where Vance explicitly credited Lieutenant Carter's real-time tactical analysis as the decisive factor in mission success. It was in the handwritten note left anonymously on her cot. "You didn't just save the mission. You saved us from ourselves." Months later, when Carter finally walked without crutches, not perfectly, but with a determined grace, the SEALs didn't cheer. They simply nodded. That nod said more than any apology ever could. Because true regret isn't spoken, it's lived. And they were living it, every day, in the way they treated their comrades, questioned their assumptions, and honored resilience over appearance. The desert, indifferent to glory, kept turning. Sandstorms erased footprints. Bullet casings rusted. But some lessons carved themselves deeper than stone. And high above Camp Bastion, on the wall of the newly renamed Carter Tactical Intelligence Center, a plaque bore a single line she'd once murmured during that fateful night. "The strongest soldiers aren't the ones who never fall. They're the ones who rise, even when the world mocks their limp." Visitors often paused before it. Some saluted. Others just stood in silence. But all left changed. Because in a world that often confuses strength with invincibility, Carter had redefined it entirely, not with a roar, but with a step. One painful, undeniable step at a time. They laughed when she walked past, wounded, weary, but unbroken. They were silent when she walked back, victorious, not for herself, but for them. In war, courage wears many faces. Hers just happened to walk with a limp.